This video provides a basic introduction to compound meter. You will learn how to recognize it when you see it or hear it, how to tell it apart from simple meter, and how to notate it. The difference between simple meter and compound meter is as follows. In simple meter, each beat gets divided by 2. While in compound meter, each beat gets divided by 3. Remember that the beats provide the basic pulse of a song. They are what you naturally tap your foot to. The number of beats per bar and the type of note that represents the beat will vary depending on the time signature. In simple meter time signatures, remember that the bottom number is the beat note, the type of note that gets counted as the beat and provides the pulse of the song. The top number tells us how many of that kind of note can fit in each bar. In 2/4, for example, each bar can fit 2 quarter notes, or the equivalent thereof. This doesn't mean that every bar of 2/4 has to contain 2 quarter notes. It just means that all the notes in a bar of 2/4 have to add up to be equal in value to 2 quarter notes. In the more common simple meter time signatures, such as 3/4 and 4/4, since the bottom number is 4, the beat note is a quarter note. And that primary quarter note pulse, or beat, can be naturally divided into 2 eighth note divisions, or 2 eighth rests, or one of each. Each eighth note division can be further divided into 2 16th note subdivisions. In compound meter time signatures, like 6/8, 9/8, and 12/8, the bottom number does not represent the beat note, but instead represents the division note. The top number, again, tells us how many of that type of note can fit in each bar. In 6/8, for example, each bar can fit 6 eighth notes, or the equivalent thereof. The question now is, how many beats can fit in each bar? Since there are 3 divisions per beat in compound meter, we can figure out the number of beats per bar by dividing the top number of the time signature by 3. In 6/8, for example, there are 2 beats per bar, because 6 eighth notes divided by 3 equals 2. So if the division note is an eighth note, what's the beat note? The beat note in any compound meter time signature will always be equal to 3 times the value of the division note. For this reason, it will always be a dotted note value. So, if the division note is an eighth note, then the beat note is a dotted quarter note. It can be useful to refer to drum beats to see and hear the relationship between the beats and divisions. This is because, generally speaking, the kick drum and snare drum often work together to emphasize the beats, while either the hi-hats or ride cymbal will emphasize the divisions. This information can be very useful when you need to determine the meter of a track by ear. If the track doesn't have any drums, you should still hear the beats and the divisions being played or implied by the other instruments. What you see here is 1 bar of a drum beat in 6/8. In 6/8, remember, there are 2 beats per bar. In this example, the kick drum is playing a dotted quarter note on beat 1, and the snare drum is playing a dotted quarter note on beat 2. Notice how the eighth notes in the hi-hat line are beamed. Just as in simple meter time signatures, notes should only be beamed together if they fall within the same beat, almost never across beats. By only beaming notes that fall within a common beat, it makes it much easier to see where the beats are. In this example, we can clearly see the 2 beats. Here's beat 1, and here's beat 2. The eighth notes are counted very differently in compound meter than they are in simple meter. If we applied the simple meter eighth note counting, 1 and 2 and, etc., it wouldn't work, because the numbers wouldn't line up with the proper beats. Because there are 3 eighth notes per beat, we recommend counting 1 la li, 2 la li. With this counting method, the numbers line up with their corresponding beats. Since there are 3 divisions per beat and 2 beats per bar, then 6/8 is referred to as compound duple meter. Here are 4 bars of the same drum beat below a simple saxophone melody. The sax melody features dotted quarter notes on each beat of the first 3 bars, then a dotted half note filling the entire 4th bar. I'm going to play this example. You will hear other instruments besides the sax and drum set. See if you can keep track of the 2 beats in each bar, and try counting along with the eighth note divisions by saying 1 la li, 2 la li. Here is a drum beat in 9/8, which is a less common time signature than 6/8 or 12/8. In this example, the eighth note divisions will be played on the ride cymbal instead of the hi-hats. Here's beat 1, beat 2, and beat 3. The kick drum will play a dotted quarter note on beat 1, and the snare drum will play a dotted quarter note on beat 2. Take a look at what the kick drum is going to play on beat 3. Beat 3 is being split up into a quarter note and an eighth note. Since a quarter note is equal in value to 2 eighth notes, the quarter note would take up 3 and la, and the eighth note would fall on li. Since there are 3 divisions per beat and 3 beats per bar, the 9/8 is referred to as compound triple meter. Here are 4 bars of the same drum beat below a bass line. The bass line features a variety of note types, including dotted quarter notes, a dotted quarter rest on beat 2 of bar 4, 3 eighth notes on beat 1 of bar 3, and quarter notes sharing beats with eighth notes. I'm going to play this example. The tempo of this example will be a little faster than the previous. See if you can keep track of the 3 beats in each bar, and try counting along with the eighth note divisions by saying 1 la li, 2 la li, 3 la li. Here is a drum beat in 12/8. Here's beat 1, beat 2, beat 3, and beat 4. Take a look at what the kick drum will be playing within beat 3. There's an eighth rest on beat 3, and 2 eighth notes on the la and li of 3, respectively. Notice that the 2 eighth notes are beamed because they still fall within the same beat. Since there are, once again, 3 divisions per beat and 4 beats per bar, then 12/8 is referred to as compound quadruple meter. Here are 4 bars of the same drum beat. Below the notation is the same beat as it would look in Logic's piano roll. Here's the hi-hat line, the snare drum line, and the kick drum line. In the transport bar, I've set the time signature of the Logic session to 12/8 time, and I've set the division to an eighth note so that I can easily see the beats and the eighth note divisions in the grid of the piano roll. Notice that the tempo is set to 150 beats per minute, even though the actual tempo is 100 beats per minute. In some DAWs, including Logic and GarageBand, the tempo note can only be set to a quarter note. For music in 6/8, 9/8, or 12/8, the actual tempo should correspond to the dotted quarter note, since that's the beat note. When working with any of these time signatures in Logic or GarageBand, you may want to take note that the actual tempo is 2/3 the tempo shown in the transport bar. Pro Tools, on the other hand, does allow the user to set the tempo note to a dotted note. Listen to this beat and try to count along by saying 1 la li, 2 la li, 3 la li, 4 la li. Now let's compare a bar of eighth notes in 4/4 to a bar of eighth notes in 12/8. Because there are 4 beats per bar in both 4/4 and 12/8, it's easy to see the essential difference between simple meter and compound meter by looking at these 2 examples. In simple meter, each beat is naturally split into 2 divisions, while in compound meter, each beat is naturally split into 3 divisions. First, I'll play the one in 4/4. Next, I'll play the one in 12/8. If you are already familiar with triplets, you may have noticed that the eighth notes in compound meter look a lot like eighth note triplets in simple meter. Since divisions of 3 do not naturally occur in simple meter, you will always see this 3 above or below a group of 3 triplets. In compound meter, the beat is naturally divided into 3, so it's not necessary to add the 3 above or below the groups of 3 division notes. Now let's compare 2 drum beats, one in 4/4 and one in 12/8. First, I'll play the one in 4/4. Listen to the hi-hats to keep track of the 2 divisions in each beat. Next, I'll play the drum beat in 12/8. Listen to the hi-hats to keep track of the 3 divisions in each beat. Here is a chart of note values in 12/8. The same note values are used in 6/8 and 9/8 with the exception of the dotted whole note, which is too large to fit in a bar of 6/8 or 9/8 because it takes up 4 beats. This should give you a clear picture of how each level of note value is derived from the one above it. As you can see, a dotted half note is equal in value to 2 dotted quarter notes, thus it lasts for 2 beats. Let's look at the level of the subdivision. Just as in common simple meter time signatures like 3/4 and 4/4, the subdivision note is a 16th note. Also, just as in simple meter, each division note is divided into 2 subdivision notes. Since each beat in compound meter contains 3 divisions, each beat would of course contain 6 subdivisions. The 16th note subdivisions are counted 1 ta, la ta, li ta, 2 ta, la ta, li ta, etc. Notice that the syllables that are used to count the 8th note divisions are still here. The divisions and subdivisions can be combined in a variety of ways within a beat. Here are just a few possibilities. Each beat in this bar of 12/8 contains a different combination of 8th and 16th notes. This bar would be counted as follows: 1 la li ta, 2 la ta li, 3 ta la li, 4 la ta li ta. You will also need to be comfortable with the employment of different types of rests in compound meter. As long as you are familiar with the appearance and duration of each rest value, you should have no problem with interpreting them and using them when notating your own music. Finally, here is a melody in 12/8 containing a wide variety of note values and a bit more rhythmic complexity than any of the previous examples. You will hear drums, bass synth, and lead synth, but you will only see the lead and bass synth on the staff. The tempo is 90 beats per minute. Remember that no matter how much rhythmic complexity you might hear among the various elements of a piece of music, you should still be able to keep track of the main pulse or beat around which everything is happening. The drums in this example will help you keep track of the 4 beats in every bar. Again, try counting along, even if you're just counting the dotted quarter note pulse. Practice reading, counting out loud, and tapping out basic compound meter rhythms first, then gradually work your way up to more complex ones. Try writing something in compound meter too. If you get hands-on with compound meter in a variety of ways, you will become well versed in it in no time.